Okay, so for today, we will talk about building an innovation factory. So this is an HBR article written by Andrew Hargadon and Robert Sutton back in 2000, the year 2000. It's a well-cited article. It's not exactly short, but it's not too long. And that's typical of any Harvard Business Review article. So by now, you would have a good feeling of how an HBR article would be written. Okay, there's a lot of meat into it, but there's also a lot of space to actually provide some varying interpretations on what the authors would be positioning, or what the authors would be proposing for thought. So in this article, okay, let's start off with the context. Ideas, innovation. We hear this cliche, this is the most precious currency in the new economy. In a similar fashion, you've probably heard of data as the new oil, right? So a lot of the underlying principles, if you may, of the world nowadays. I mean, it's rooted in the fact that, okay, they're born out of ideas, they're born out of innovations. And here, the best innovators have systematized the generation and testing of new ideas. So these are um, key points that the authors have tried to establish in the article. Now, what are the takeaways here? So if you are to forget the details. Well, I hope you don't forget the details. But if you forgot the details of the articles, okay, then the key takeaways are this. Okay, number one, old ideas can be used as raw materials for new ideas. So this is what's known as knowledge brokering. So that's the first key takeaway. The second key takeaway is that companies can repeat this process again and again. This is known in the article as the knowledge brokering cycle. So two ideas, two key takeaways. Uh, and I think the implication here is that when it comes to innovation, when it comes to new technology, okay, and especially on the topic of technology acquisition, um, one should not feel worried or bothered or anxious about having to come up with new ideas for new technologies. In fact, a lot of the things that you see around you as far as innovations are concerned, they have their roots in something that's already been existing for quite some time. Maybe the circumstance there is that it gives that feeling of novelty because people perhaps back then weren't really too focused on the old original idea or the originating idea, or it's possible that um, it could be more than one idea. It could be two, three ideas that are not obviously connected, but somehow through human ingenuity, you're able to connect these ideas together. But the point of this first key takeaway is not to be scared, I suppose, not to be too anxious or not to feel pressured of coming up with new ideas. Okay? Knowing for a fact that new ideas can really come from old ideas. Okay? And the second key takeaway is that, okay, it's a repeatable process. It is something that you can do over and over again. And because it is something that can be done over and over again, uh, there's a certain level of mastery that can be attained because of that repetition. So people actually benefit from repeating this process because they become better and better innovators or inventors as time passes by. Okay, and you can already start to see the ideas as to why in an earlier commentary regarding the S curve or the nature of the trajectory of technology, right? So at the start, it can be very slow, but once the benefits start to plow back, and they accrue over time, then it's at that moment where the trajectory seems to follow a very steep path. Okay, it explodes, so to speak. So yeah, I mean, It can be nervous, it can be, or one can be nervous, or it can be nerve-wracking at the start. But the whole idea there is nothing. Don't worry. Okay? New ideas come from old ideas, and you can keep on doing that process again and again. So let's go down to the knowledge brokering cycle. So this is at the heart of the article. Okay, and there are cycles. So if you think about it, um, depends on where you find yourself in. I mean, if it's an existing company, maybe certain projects are already they're already testing the idea, or maybe in some companies they're trying to incubate ideas already that have been solicited from various sources. Okay, but they follow a cycle. Okay? One can think of it this way. Maybe it's initially linear, so we can probably take a look at capturing good ideas as your first point. And then when you have the test, okay, and once you're done with the test, it might seem to you that, okay, after you've done the test, okay, I mean, you can probably stop. But it's possible that based on the results of your test, they can actually be fuel or material for more good ideas. So in which case you repeat that cycle. But in any case, the authors explain that it is a cycle. Okay, they make that claim that it is a cycle, and true enough, and that's the only way for us to actually build skill in terms of innovation. We can only do R&D work veritably well if we can have a good handle of the process and keep on repeating it. Okay? So let's do a deep dive on the knowledge brokering cycle. So first is capturing good ideas. So let's start with that phase. So what happens here? Well, your knowledge brokers, okay, tend to span multiple markets, industries, geographical locations, business units. They can come from everywhere. And because they come from everywhere, your ideas can come from anywhere. Now, in this case, the old ideas are the main source for new ideas, even if it is not certain how the old ideas might help in the future. Okay, so you notice that, okay, old ideas are like the fuel for your new ideas, okay, in the future. Okay, and that's how it is. Okay, now playing with a promising old idea to figure out what works and what doesn't. Okay, this is what happens typically in this stage. Okay, so you gather old ideas. Okay, and then at this stage you're just gathering. You're just foraging for ideas. Okay, but then at that time, okay, early on, you might start to think of new ways. You might start to intellectually manipulate those old ideas in your head. Like, okay, what am I going to do with this old idea? Okay. And in here, okay, brokers doing focused work on specific problems, especially when studying new industries or visiting new locations. You see, when people who are given the responsibility to do innovation work, people in R&D, for example, sometimes they borrow a lot of ideas that are not typically found in their current field. So they look at adjacent fields. They look around them, okay? And then they try to capture good ideas. Maybe not copy them. Maybe in some cases they do copy them, right? I mean, if it's possible to make the copy, but sometimes it's copying is not feasible. So, but the ideas are there. So they might have some seed material with adjacent fields, no, and then they get good ideas from those adjacent fields. And this is where it's beneficial to have cross-pollination. The idea of cross-pollination is that you want the members of a group to come from different places, right? Come from different backgrounds. And then once they've done their tour of duty in that group, they move on to another group. Again, having the same parameters on how the later compositions of the group be, right? So it's still going to be diverse. So that's the whole idea. So a person comes into this new group, okay, learns from everybody else, okay, as well, and they move out and move on to another group, and the process continues. And this is known as cross-pollination. So you want talents to really move around. And why is this being done? Well, the benefit for cross-pollination is really to get good ideas, okay? To vary the perspective. In some books, in literature, you call this cognitive diversity. You know, you really want to have a good feel of your surroundings, so to speak, right? You don't want to be staying stuck in a very homogeneous context. I mean, and if it's homogeneous, then chances are it's really obvious to everybody else. So good ideas typically come from old ideas, but they come from different fields. Now, brokers also scan for new ideas in more generalized ways. So maybe the idea might be too specific, but then brokers have a way of trying to simplify things. So they come up with more generalized ideas from those specific things. Okay? And from those generalized ideas, then they get clarity of what else can be done, or what were things that haven't been tested before. So okay, that's a possibility for them. And as such, brokers thus create massive collections of ideas. Some will lead to innovation, some will not. Right? Well, what's important here is the massive collection of ideas. It says here by Thomas Edison, the one who founded GE, General Electric, to invent, you need a good imagination and a pile of junk. Right? Well, not everything would be gems, right? Your ideas, well, in as how we know it, sometimes people laugh at our ideas. Well, could be that way. I mean, that's normal, and you shouldn't feel worried about that as well, right? It's part of the process. Okay. Sometimes people are so enamored with the hero mentality, I suppose, that the really good ones tend to generate good ideas. But what most people don't understand is that for these good guys to come up with good ideas, they might have had a lot of bad ideas prior to that, right? And you know, I mean, and it happened. That's normal. It's normal. So one should not get discouraged. Sometimes you will encounter a lot of bad ideas before you gravitate towards a good idea. Now the challenge right now is how do you minimize that? Okay, but that's something that will be discussed much later time. Okay, but one lesson that we can get from here is that personally, if you're tasked to do innovation work, don't be scared to coming up with a lot of ideas, and don't be scared to accept the reality that most of them may not be good ideas. They'll be bad. They might even be horrible. Okay? And for those who are responsible for organizations doing innovations, you have to accept the fact that not everyone can be so highly productive that 10 ideas out of 10 would be good ideas. So you need to create some sort of organizational safety in your organization, your teams, to allow your members of your team to keep on coming up with ideas, even if they're bad ideas. Okay. Why? Because that's normal. That's part of the process. That's how you really acquire knowledge in new technology. Okay. So, and here we notice the history of technological innovation is full of examples of knowledge brokers bringing together ideas from disparate or separate contexts. Now we go on to the second stage, okay, keeping ideas alive, or the incubation period. Okay, the biggest hurdle to solving problems, people can't put their fingers on the necessary information at the right time, even if they've already learned it. Okay, so it's possible that, you know, we've heard this say, you already know that, right? Or don't you recall? We've actually discussed that like 6 years ago. Okay, what, you know? The fact of the matter is that that's the beauty of the human brain, right? I mean, things that may not be important to us personally, sometimes we push it back. Okay? Only to find out later on that they could be useful later on. Right? Pwede pala, no? It's possible. But organizations, okay, specifically their organizational memories are even tougher to maintain. Why? Because organizations, their composition change over time. People come in, people go. And more often than not, depending on the culture of the organization, you might even have organizations that are unable to really capture the ideas generated by the top talent of the company. Okay, so that's even tougher. So when that top talent leaves the company, you have no way of trying to extract whatever good ideas this top talent was able to produce. Okay? Unless you're lucky, you have some sort of documentation or knowledge management. Okay, yeah, but that's not usually the case for all of the companies. Okay, so much of the company's stockpile of ideas is embedded in objects. Okay, the designers can look at, touch, and play with. So this is the importance of tangibility. I mean, the idea that there has to be some sort of artifact. Ideas, easily we know we have a lot of ideas. And 99% of the time, these ideas are just stuck in our heads, right? But in order for you to keep your ideas alive and to give some fighting chance to these ideas need to be embodied in something. They need to be written down. They need to be designed, perhaps in a prototype. They need to be socialized, okay? Bounced around with other people. Okay? But that's the importance of making your ideas tangible. Because if you're tangible, okay, there's some manifestation, external manifestation of your idea, then it's possible for you even to look at it from a third-person perspective. Okay, so all the biases can be removed, feedback can be incorporated into that, okay, so on and so forth. And that's why it's important that you need to have these ideas manifested externally. Okay, maintaining the stockpile of ideas and documenting them. That's the importance of idea curation. So you curate ideas, and more often than not, okay, the best knowledge brokers are those who not necessarily have a deep well of ideas. Okay, the best knowledge brokers are those who know a lot of people who know ideas. So the know who is important. Okay, it's not the know what, it's not the know how, it's really the know who. Okay, so they know that so and so did some work on so and so. Okay, and this could probably be a good connection for something that was done by so and so. So it's the know who. Okay, so if you think about it, yeah, as a knowledge broker, you can be like a pack rat, you can be a librarian, you can be a good Samaritan. You share your ideas, you let others play around with it. Now, for the next stage in the knowledge brokering cycle, imagining new uses for old ideas. And I think this is where, I think most of you can say this is where the magic happens. One way to actually find new uses for old ideas is analogical thinking. Okay. So analogies are powerful tools in order for you to think of new uses for things that were not originally designed to operate in that way. Okay, so old ideas can become powerful solutions to new problems if brokers are skilled at seeing such analogies. I think that's the fulcrum, right? I mean, that's the tipping point. That if you're able to find an analogy, okay, between an old idea and a new problem, then you have a solution. Okay? An effective broker develops creative answers to hard problems because people within the organization talk a lot about their work and about who might help them do it better. So, I mean, you're the pack rat. So if you're the type who likes to keep absorbing these things from all around you, then at some point in time when you encounter a new problem and you're quite skilled in trying to play around mentally, okay, a lot of the analogical thinking that's expected of you, then you'll realize, oh, this particular solution can be best done by so and so because there was a similar thing that happened there. So when we think about analogical thinking, the operative term is similar. Not exactly the same, because it's not going to be new, right? If it's the same, it's no longer new, but similar. So there would be things that would be the same. There would be things that are not the same. So how do you resolve those things that are not the same? Okay, so that's where the the problem solving comes in, and that's where the innovation starts to be inserted. So again, part of tangibility, this is the importance of having an effective physical layout. That's why you have labs, you have laboratories, okay? And all about the right people with the right attitudes. Okay, so it's not really about having that sense of genius, right? I mean, and this is a cliche already that it's really about the mindset. It's more attitude than aptitude, as they say. But same thing with innovation. I mean, it's really behavioral. Um, and I guess the lesson that we can pick up from here is that, okay, well, you don't have to be a genius to be an innovator or to be an inventor, right? You just need to have that right perspective, that courage to really forge on ahead, no? And really having that pure intention to solve a problem, right? So in the end, it's really just solving problems, finding ways to solve that problems. Okay. Okay, and the last stage is putting promising concepts to the test. And I think this is where people tend to miss out horribly, right? It's not enough that you have a good idea, right? You have to test it. Okay, and this is where proof of concept and experimentation comes in. So another quote from Edison, okay, the real measure of success is the number of experiments that can be crowded into 24 hours. Okay. So for Edison, the idea isn't enough. You have to test it. You have to demonstrate that it is possible, that it is feasible, that it's worthwhile. Okay. And this is where the management as a science comes in, okay? Specifically technology management. I mean, experimentation. You go through tests, you do things as they come along, okay? You adjust, you revise, okay? So that's the idea of experimentation. And brokers must be good at testing ideas, okay? And the thing here is that you have to treat ideas as inexpensive. There's this quotation that I love to share to everyone, especially to entrepreneurs. Ideas are cheap. It's so easy to think of something, right? But execution is everything. Okay? In other words, if you're not going to actualize, materialize your ideas into something, anything, then it's not worth anything, right? Might be a good idea, okay, but it's not gonna get you far. Remember, ideas can probably open doors for you, but it's still up to you to go through the door. Okay? So ideas are cheap, and it's good. That's why it's preferable to have ideas that are normal, ideas that are ordinary, but these ordinary ideas are executed. That these ordinary ideas are put into action. That's preferable, as opposed to spending a lot of time really analyzing a lot of these things in the pursuit of a higher idea, right? And yet, in the process, you are not really doing anything. You're just doing ideation, just coming up with a better and better and better idea. Well, nothing's gonna happen. It's not gonna push you forward. Okay. Now, brokers rarely keep trying to make something work in the face of evidence that it won't. Okay, so brokers know when to stop, to hang on to an idea. If they know that based on the evidences of their own tests, that their idea is not going to work, then they let it go. Okay, you are not too invested emotionally or psychologically in a single idea. If it has been proven that the idea doesn't make sense, let go of it. Okay, move on to something else. But maybe you'll ask, would it be possible that you could have been wrong, maybe in your tests, or maybe there were things that you haven't really considered? Okay, maybe. That is quite likely. But for that to happen often is quite remote. I mean, if you are rigorous, if you're very thoughtful of how you design your test, then it is unlikely that your test would be the problem, right? Later on, somebody would probably prove to you that it's wrong or inaccurate or incomplete, but that's not your job at that moment, right? So what's important is even if you have an ordinary idea, put it to the test, make adjustments. Okay, that is effective technology management. Now, another thing that's important to note here is they avoid this not invented here syndrome. So they tend to be dismissive of things that didn't come from their own backyard, right? So, and individually, this is something that you encounter in some people. Like they tend to be close-minded about ideas from others because that's not their idea. They're so in love with their own idea that they're not open-minded. Well, that's a wrong behavior when it comes to innovation, when it comes to technology management. You have to be open to the fact that the better ideas may not come from you. Okay. I mean, if it came from you, eventually, of course, history will be the judge of that, right? But that's not always the case sometimes. And even those whom we glorify as the progenitor of such great ideas, normally they'd be humble enough to tell you, they got these ideas from old ideas. So again, I mean, we shouldn't be too attached to ideas, knowing for a fact that, I mean, originally it probably has come from an old idea. So nothing to be proud there. And with that mindset, we know that, okay, we avoid the not invented here syndrome. Okay. Now, putting a concept to the test doesn't just help determine it has commercial value. Okay. So sometimes the fear of most organizations is tests can be expensive, experiments can be expensive. Well, nowadays you're seeing an improvement in the mindset of companies. Like they're willing to make their organizations fail, but it's not just a matter of failing or the fact of failing. Okay, it's failing well, it's failing quickly, okay, and recovering quickly. I think the act of failing is not bad in itself. Okay? Sure, there could have been losses. You could have avoided having to spend a lot of things. Okay, maybe failures might have been a result of imprudence. Maybe they didn't really think through the ideas very well. Okay, well, there's lessons. There are lessons to be learned there. Okay, but learn those lessons. Make sure that you really learn them. Okay, and that's failing well. Okay, you avoid the trap of failing and then not learning from it, so you fail again, fail on the same thing. That's worse. That is a waste. If you have not learned your lessons from the previous failures and then you encounter that same failure again, that's disgraceful. Actually, I mean, you haven't really learned from your previous failure, and yet it happens. Organizations tend to fail the same thing over and over again if they've not really ingrained it in their system to try to learn or extract the lessons from the earlier failures. And again, of course, failing quickly, um, which is why, I mean, if you want to fail quickly, then you have to test quickly. So try not to delay the tests. Okay, I mean, if there's an opportunity for you to really run the tests quickly, okay, as soon as possible, in a limited scope, do it. Okay. So now, uh, how do we become our own knowledge broker? Well, there are many ways of doing this. Okay, knowledge brokers that build reputation as trusted third parties thrive. Okay, I mean, it's possible that individually on your own you could have been a very good knowledge broker. There might be some of you, maybe a colleague, okay, or a direct report who might be very good knowledge brokers. Okay, that happens. Okay. Another way of building your own knowledge broker is building full-fledged internal consulting groups. So you come up with your own team. Okay, that will do the idea generation. Okay, and typically these are examples of R&D teams, right? Or instead of forming a team, you could hire people who may have faced similar problems, okay, that are similar or analogous to the problems that the current company is facing right now. Okay? Or it can be, in this case, renting an outside broker. But it poses this question: is it okay to outsource innovation? Okay. And it's possible. I mean, outsourcing innovation is different from open innovation. Okay. Um, the role or the task of doing innovation is delegated to somebody else outside of the company. That's outsourcing. But can you afford to do that? Okay. And don't you think it might be you might be better off trying to organically grow that skill set? It's not even a skill set yet. I mean, it all starts with a proper attitude, right? Knowing that, okay, I have to be innovative. Okay. And by being innovative, it's nothing more than just looking for old ideas, repackaging them, finding new uses for them. Not that difficult. Involving, maybe yes, but with the right attitude, you can do that. So the question right now: do you really want to outsource that? Is it worth the cost of outsourcing your innovation tasks to an outside entity? Or are we talking about open innovation, wherein you are more collaborative in your approach? I do some ideas, then somebody else do their own ideas, and then you meet together, some sort of a conference or symposium, or maybe just some sort of an agreed upon meeting. Okay. Isn't that a much better approach, maybe, as opposed to just simply delegating and forgetting? That's something to think about. So, conclusion: what change is coming? If it hasn't come, it will come. It's coming. How they think about innovation and how their company cultures reflect that thinking. We see a lot of companies right now looking into the innovation aspect. At least this was true maybe in the early 2000s. We see a lot of high-tech companies, harping the gospel of innovation, trying to come up with new ideas, documenting them. Oh, we see that. I mean, at the very least, the attention given to innovation has become front and center already. But the question right now is, has it maintained traction? Are you really able to extract benefits from that type of mindset? The jury is still out. In some companies that they would have been successful, in some not really. Okay. And another thing that we take a look here is the dangerous fiction of the lone genius. Like, there's this single person who's like the most charismatic, the most energetic, the most intelligent being in your company. Okay. That person is the only one authorized to do innovation. No, no, no. Everyone has an obligation even to be innovative, to think of new ideas. Okay? New ideas coming from old ideas, repackaged, okay, for a certain context. Okay? You don't have to be a genius to be innovative. Okay? And a matter of taking developed ideas and applying them in new situations. Again, not being anxious of trying your hand in looking at old ideas and maybe thinking creatively on how to repurpose them, okay, for newer problems, newer contexts, newer situations. And with that, I end my commentary on the article by Hargadon and Sutton.